It's my first day at work. I'm so excited. I finally made it. I'm going to learn how to be a business person and an entrepreneur. I'm in my freshly ironed shirt, dry cleaned suit, perfectly polished shoes. I arrive at 161 Collins Street. I look at the building. I look up at the building. It's a giant skyscraper. The whole building was owned by one of the wealthiest families in Australia, a billionaire family. And they were one of the co-founders of the company I was going to be working for. I had made it. I had reached new heights. It felt like I too was going to be reaching new heights, just like this giant skyscraper. I enter into the building. I go to the elevators. I enter the elevators and off to the 9th floor. As I exit the 9th floor and enter the building, it's beautiful. I was in my honeymoon period with Ducere. Everything was amazing. My office space was amazing. Ducere is an educational company that provided leadership, management, and programs by interviewing global leaders all around the world and then creating courses that were going to be distributed to TAFEs and universities around the world. And part of the vision was making these courses accessible, and also accessible in my home continent, on the African continent. I felt I was using my life worthwhile. I was going to be part of something bigger than myself and make a huge difference, not just in Australia, but around the world. It was wonderful working at Ducere. I was responsible for negotiating agreements with presidents, prime ministers, Nobel Prize winners, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, so that we could video them and use their face image inside of our educational courses. I was also responsible for creating briefs from time to time when we would meet with an ambassador from a different country, or leaders from different business communities would come along, and I would have a seat at the table. I was at the top of my game, and I was only in my late 20s. I definitely thought I'd made it in life. Working at Ducere, at first I was the only black person there. And I was young. I had access to a wealthy family. I had access to CEOs of some of Australia's big corporates. I had access and was creating more money for myself and my life. And I felt like I was making a real difference, not just here in Australia, but also on the African continent. I definitely was living the top, best life I could think of. I was definitely ahead of the pack, I thought. In my view, having access to powerful people meant that perhaps I could be able to be influential too, and be able to influence people inside of what could be possible for my communities as well. Living in Australia, there isn't an identifiable African Australian where you'll say, I know that person, he's a leader in the African Australian community. That was not visible to me. Unlike in the Jewish communities, the Greek communities, the Chinese communities. In these communities, in multicultural Australia, certain communities definitely have a visible leader. For us, as the African Australian community, there isn't an identifiable, visible leader. So I thought that this was also a great opportunity for myself to be that person. And perhaps I could be that person. For me, this was an amazing opportunity to learn business. As I've previously mentioned, I grew up in a context that this is a white man's world. So I might as well learn how white people do business. That would give me an edge on being an influential African Australian. My mentality when I started working at Ducere was that I was going to take everything on board, unquestionably. I was hungry to learn. I was hungry to please. When I took on the opportunity at Ducere, I took a 20% pay cut. It was a startup after all, and I felt that was reasonable. And in any case, I had to prove myself. So I started out with a dip in my finances. Though I had taken a dip in my salary, I worked my butt off. I was going to every single meeting with the co-founder. I was doing all the follow-ups. I was preparing the briefs. I was negotiating the deals. I was making sure that every single detail of all our agreements, whether it was with institutions or with the individuals, was top notch. I worked my butt off. Over that period of time, I then got promoted to the Director of Corporate Affairs and the General Counsel of the entire organization. As my titles changed, so did my pay. I was earning good money. I was earning more money than I'd ever earned in my entire life. As I continued growing the business, I also negotiated shares for the deals that I was creating. I had proved to the organization that I was highly capable of creating profitable deals. That was something that I'd never done for myself, so I had also shown myself that I was capable of creating profitable deals. I was creating multi-million-dollar deals. So over time, I wanted a piece of the cake as well. And being a Black migrant, this was about creating abundance and wealth, not just for myself, for my family and my communities. I had a responsibility to unleash my full potential. I was scared to ask for shares. I was the only Black person in the organization for a very long time. And finally, I was going to have the courage as a Black man to request a seat on the table, to be a participant in the profits of the organization. That was scary for me. The opportunity of having shares would mean that there was a Black person sitting at a table of some of Australia's wealthy families. For me, having shares in the organization wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for myself. It was a victory for myself, my family, my entire community. For me, being able to have shares would be an opportunity to have a seat on the table for my voice, for the voice of Black people on the table. That's what it meant for me to have shares. I remember when I mustered the courage to sit down with one of the co-founders to request shares in the organization. For about a month, I had prepared a brief for the case for why it was worth me being given shares. I had created multi-million-dollar partnerships. I had opened up offices in the United States, the United Kingdom, Mauritius. And I'd done that without having to fly to any of those countries. I had investigated the tax consequences to the founders and the organizations of operating in the different jurisdictions. I was across the entire company. Financially, the personnel, the opportunities, what was working, what wasn't working. I had it in the palm of my hands. And I remember the day when I had the meeting with the co-founder. I walked into work that day very nervous. I remember having a call with my mentor, nervous about it. I was about to chicken out. What right did I have to make such a request. I should be grateful for what I already have. This was being excessive, I thought to myself. My mentor reminded me that it was just a game. It was an opportunity to create. I remember walking into the meeting room. I was the first person to arrive. This meeting room had no windows. It was a dark room. I sat down with my notes in front of me, waiting for the founder. I hear the door opening. My heart is racing because now I have to perform. Now I have to make my request. He walks into the room and sits at the head of the table. I'm sitting at the side. A few moments later, his PA also enters the room. I was not expecting that. In my head, I say to myself, do I continue with this meeting or not? I don't feel like I can have the conversation and ask him for shares while his PA is in the room. I shake his hand. He sits down first, then I sit down again. I look at him. I said, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. He said, no problem. It's great to catch up. I said, I really love the vision and the values of our company. I love that we get to create extraordinary leadership and management courses that make a real difference to people's lives by capturing the stories of presidents, prime ministers, Nobel Prize winners, and CEO of Fortune 500 companies. He said, I love the work that you're doing. I said, I would like to have shares. He looked at me, neither frowning, neither smiling. He says, how does that look like? I said, it could look like shares in the company, or it could look like a profit share in the deals that I'm negotiating. As I'm saying this, his PA is furiously writing, and my heart is racing. He looks at me, and for a moment he pauses. And then he says, yeah, that could work. I feel so excited. I feel like I've reached another milestone. I'm a black, gay migrant to Australia, and I've just negotiated shares with some very wealthy families. I'm on top of the world. So, shortly after starting at Ducere, I became eligible for Australian citizenship. This was the ultimate dream. On the 26th of January 2014, I became an Australian citizen. I was finally, ultimately free. Australian citizenship meant a lot to me. It meant that I could start a business and fail and pick myself up and start again. It meant I could travel the world visa-free. Unlike on my Zimbabwean passport, for every single country, for many countries that I had to visit, I would need to apply for a visa. So imagine being on my Zimbabwean passport and going to Germany. I would have to go to the German embassy. I would have to prove to them I had money in my account. I had to prove I had a ticket. I had to already tell them which hotels or places I was going to be staying at for how many days. Everything had to be pre-planned because of the passport I was traveling on. Being an Australian citizen meant that my Australian passport allowed me to go to Germany with no questions asked. That's the politics of citizenship. Being an Australian permanent resident did not guarantee that I could live in Australia forever. Anything could happen. A new government could come in and change the laws again. Being an Australian citizen meant that I could finally stay here permanently and indefinitely, no matter what. I had lived my life with the fear that if something happened, I would always get deported back to Zimbabwe, to nothing, to a country where I would go to jail for being gay. I'm an Australian citizen. My future was now secure. One of the things I loved about Ducere is that they also had a foundation, the Ducere Foundation, which was doing some amazing work on the African continent. Over time, though, the thing about Ducere was that the people in charge were white people. And early on, I was the only black person in the organization. What was surprising for me, though, was that they were not really asking me for my input on some of the things that were happening on the ground, whether it's in my own home country or in my network. So we have this amazing organization that is well-funded, making a big difference, actually, on the African continent, but yet devoid of black people in the decision-making part of the organization, particularly here in Australia. They had some great partnerships on the ground, but in Australia, it was white people making decisions for black people. They were making decisions in a historical experience they did not share. So I could see some of the things that were working well and the things that were not working because they didn't have the experience of a black person living in the country. A simple example is that when you live in a country like Australia, the UK, or the United States, you come from a very developed context of corporate governance. You have systems, procedures to follow, you have rules about nepotism, etc. Now, on the African continent, those principles are important, but they show up in a very different way. So, for example, in my entire family, I am related to hundreds of people in the village. My grandfather was a polygamist. My great-grandfather was also a polygamist. My grandfather on my mom's side had 3 wives. My great-grandfather had 7 to 9 wives. I was related to an entire village. So on the ground, when you talk about nepotism, that doesn't show up as nepotism. It's just the familial line of making things work. So I could see that some of the concepts that we have in Australia and trying to apply them in the African context just did not work because it was a different societal structure. So then you have conversations about corruption, nepotism, which may not actually be relevant to forward the intention of the developmental goals. I was inspired by my uncle, Sekuru Todd Mazambani. And Sekuru Todd had started a school in Rugare, a rural part of Zimbabwe. And he had started the school in the peak of the Zimbabwean crisis. What was very inspiring was that him and the villagers were not waiting for anybody to determine their destiny. The children of that school made the bricks to build their own school. I was inspired by that. They were not waiting for any handouts. They were not waiting for an international aid organization to come in with money to take control of their futures. And the circumstances in Zimbabwe were horrible. There was hyperinflation at that time. There was barely any food that was affordable in the country as well. And the lines for fuel, which was important, were very long. But my uncle, Sekuru Todd, despite the consequences, did something to change the lives of the villagers. When my mom shared this with me and I got in communication with Sekuru Todd, us as a family, my mom, my dad, and I decided that we were going to support 2 girls to go to school. And this was also to honor my grandmother, who was denied an education. My grandmother was the sister of Securitor, and he was the one who got the education. My grandmother's father had said to the missionaries, "Don't send my daughter to school, send my son to school." Fortunately, Securitor became a great community leader and one of my inspirations. My best friend Jess said something along these lines: "This is what you were born and meant to do." I looked at her and I nodded. And then she said to me that sponsoring 2 girls was insufficient for the kind of person that I was. I felt challenged. She said I had the capability to make a huge difference. I thought to myself, how could I make a huge difference? I'm barely financially stable. I've just started out making money. I'm still building my foundations. I'm not a multimillionaire nor a billionaire. Only billionaires and millionaires can make a real difference. I'm a nobody. So I started sharing my vision of making a difference to girls' lives. I shared with everybody who would listen. And this is what I discovered. I may not have the resources personally, but I can inspire action. I got to learn to be the kind of human being that can make a huge, lasting difference by inspiring action. And if me, little me from Zimbabwe, Mutare, can do that, anybody can do that. So the Gomo Foundation got born. Gomo means a mountain. Gomo is my surname. Gomo, reaching new heights. Gomo means mountain in Shona, and we have turned Gomo into an acronym, giving others more opportunities. And our mission is to empower and enable young African women with a toolkit so that they can live an empowered life. And we do that through education. The difference of providing an education to girls is humongous. Firstly, they become leaders in their own families. A girl without an education has no say in the family. A girl without an education gets into early marriage. A girl without an education starts having children earlier, when sometimes their bodies are not even ready for babies. A girl with an education gets to be a leader in the home. A girl with an education gets to raise their children with opportunities. A girl with an education does not enter into early marriages. A girl with an education becomes a valuable contribution in society. For myself, it was critical to create an organization that also represented Black people making a difference. There was a narrative, and there is a narrative, that Black people take, and are charity cases. Yet, I promise you, right here, right now, millions, if not of billions of dollars from everyday people, your neighbor who is African Australia, is sending money home on a monthly basis so that their grandmother, their mother can have a better life. Many people of African descent around the world send billions of dollars back onto the continent, yet it's not recognized. So there's this narrative, particularly in the developed countries, that Black people are charity cases, yet many people are making a huge difference. So for myself, I wanted to be able to change the narrative and make a difference and build an institution that people in the developed world also understand, just like the Jewish families have, the Italian families have, the Chinese families have. Now, Gomo isn't about me. It's about an opportunity of making a difference to people's lives, the beneficiaries. So Gomo Foundation provides directly education for girls to attend secondary school in Zimbabwe at this point in time. But our mission is to make that available to every single woman on the African continent. When I started creating Gomo, I was tentative about whether this could really make a difference. How could I really make a difference? I'm a nobody. So I had no idea if I really could, but I had to try. The worst thing I could do was not begin to try. So I worked bloody hard. I was working night and day. I'd wake up early in the morning to determine how to create the website. I would have conversations with Jeremy, who has been with me from day one in the Gomo Foundation. We'd work throughout the night to make sure that we could talk to the schools in a different time zone. It was a lot of hard work, and there were many obstacles in our way for making it happen. Yet, we have successfully had 2 of our girls to date complete their year 12, their A levels, and we have girls all the way from year 7 who are going to complete their education, which they would never have that opportunity. We have our first girl who has finished university, a degree in accounting, and for herself created a job. That was never going to happen. In a country where over 80% of the country is unemployed, she, as a person supported by Gomo, got to create an opportunity for herself. That's what Gomo is about. After the honeymoon period at Ducere was over, I started having this niggling feeling in the back of my mind that there was just something wrong. I couldn't quite pinpoint it. Outside the company, everybody was praising Ducere. Everybody was praising the work we were doing and the real difference we were making to students' lives, as well as the charitable things we're doing in Africa. But inside the organization, it was another story. There was lots of tension, stress, uncertainty. One of the things that was slightly off was the strategy and the implementation of the strategy of the organization. One day we'd have a strategy, the next day it'd be changed, a few days later it'd be changed again, a few hours later it'd be changed. It felt strange that a strategy would change so often, but what was I to know? I wasn't the co-founder of the business. Maybe he had better information than I did. But it was kind of off. We even had a whole weekend where we went away as an entire company, had a strategy day, invited an extraordinary leader in business in Australia. We came up with a strategy, it got finalized, we celebrated over wine. We were so excited about implementing the new strategy that would make a difference to the business and, of course, to people on the African continent. Within 24 hours, the co-founder and the CEO at that time went out for coffee, changed the entire strategy unilaterally, came back and presented it to us again. This was disheartening. I really thought that, is this what it is to work in an entrepreneurial startup? Is this what it is to work in a business where strategies can change at any moment? It was very stressful. It was always uncertain. You never really knew whether you were accomplishing the results or not. Another thing that wasn't quite right was that one of the partners, a TAFE partner, the business development manager, had communicated to the co-founder about my BAM, Black Australian model, and that my modeling and showcasing different businesses, different people, was inconsistent with the vision of Ducere, and that they wanted me to stop doing that. That then got communicated to me through HR, and I was stunned. I was shocked because my only intention was to elevate people of color, Black people, ethnic minorities, to be inspired to take action in the creative space. But I was being told that what I was doing was not good. I felt like they were sucking the oxygen out of me. Furthermore, other people in Ducere agreed with this point of view that I should be stopping BAM. People I had trusted my life with, people I had sought advice from in the past. I felt alone. I felt invalidated. Another thing that wasn't quite right was finalizing my shares. I'd sent my follow-up email with a whole proposal of a revenue model for the shares. No response. Follow up in a week's time, no response. Request a meeting, no response. This went on for months. I just excused it because I just thought, well, the co-founder must be busy. He's doing better things after all. Ducere really makes a difference. So I should just trust that it's all going to be taken care of because his time is being used to really make a difference. However, I also then started hearing rumors as well in the organization of where this similar situation was occurring for other people, where things had been promised to them, but they were not being delivered. I was so grateful for the opportunity at Ducere that I was willing to please the founders and do anything. One of the things in our growth stage of the company was that we were working with this creative organization, and they were responsible for our marketing, our Facebook, our LinkedIn, and they had a team member who was just a gun. I remember the co-founder asking me to actually have a meeting with her and recruit her into the organization. I was so pleased with the opportunity to actually recruit a key member into the organization. I went to South Yarra, had a coffee with this lady, created the offer, and I said to her, we would like you to come and work with us. She said, this is a great opportunity. I love the difference your company makes. And after the coffee, she went back to work. I went back to the office. I then sent her an email confirming the details, her pay. We were going to offer her 20% more than she was being paid. The next day, I get this email, and it's from the managing director of this creative agency. And in this email, he is disgusted by what I've done, by what we've done. In short, he practically accused us of poaching his team, which we were. Didn't know that then. Accused him of costing him money. So what in fact happened was that she then went back to the organization, told them that she really wanted to stay with the creative agency and not come and work with us, but demanded a pay rise. So she used our offer to leverage a pay rise within her agency. Yes, I was dumb and naive. I existed to please. I was learning to be an entrepreneur. The managing director of this creative agency was disgusted by us. He communicated that we had practically come into, he said that he had opened his company to us, we had come in and then tried to steal away one of his key employees without ever discussing it with him. And he had spent money, time, resources in developing this person. He had wished that we had approached him first before we had approached this key employee. On top of that, in his disgust for me and for us, he told me that he was going to actively go out of his way to communicate what we had done to other business people so that they would never work with us because we could not be trusted. I was terrified. I was just starting out being a business person. I'd been only in the company for about a year. And in my first year, I was going to be blacklisted. That meant for me no opportunity. People wouldn't work with me. I'd be seen as a person who is a devious person. That couldn't happen. As soon as I got the email, I went straight to the co-founder. I go into the office and I say, "Did you see the email from the managing director?" He says, "Yes, I did." I say, "He's really angry with us." He says, "Yeah, I know." I say, "We should get onto a phone call and apologize." He says, "Nah, we're not going to do that." I walk out of the meeting, slightly shaking. I'm shook to my core. All I'm feeling is high anxiety. My life is crashing down. All I'm thinking about is I'm going to be blacklisted in the business community. I've just barely started entering the business community and now I have stuffed up. And nobody is ever going to do business with me. My future was going to be destroyed. I walk back to my seat. I slump down. And I just think. I decide to call the managing director. I dial his phone number. It rings. My heart is pounding. I'm waiting for him to yell at me on the other end of the call. He picks up the call. I say, "It's Rugare here. I'm calling to apologize." He listens. He says, "I can't believe what you guys have done. It is not good business practice to do that." I said, "I am so sorry for approaching and trying to poach your key team member. I am so sorry for costing your business money and violating your trust. You had welcomed me and the entire company into your space, and we have violated your trust. And I will never do that again." And after that, he softened up and he said, "Thank you for your apology." Afterwards, I felt that the co-founder did not have my back. I no longer trusted him. I felt that because of his position as a white, wealthy person, he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted without responsibility. That was not my situation. I'm a black migrant in Australia, starting out and creating and forming my networks, all I have is my reputation. I have no money behind me. I'm not a white man. All I have is my reputation, my hard work, and my values. That was precious to me. In early 2014, my best friend had done this personal and professional development program called the Landmark Forum. She shared it with me and invited me to do it as well. And for myself, I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm fine. I'm already at the top of my game. I'm working in a billionaire family's office. I'm being mentored by some of the most amazing people in Australia. I've got this. There's nothing else I need. And then she said to me, would I want to do the forum? And then I said to her, I'll think about it. And then she said to me, that's the thing you always say when you avoid something. I was taken aback because she was right. But I was also taken aback because me saying I'll think about it was my way of saying no, but she was holding me to account to that. So I knew something had altered by her participation in this program. So I did it. She paid for me to do it, barely paid any attention to it. They asked me what did I want to accomplish. I wrote on the form, being a better friend to Jess. It's my stuff. I'm not going to share what I want to accomplish. It's my private stuff. I did the forum. It changed and rocked my entire life. It was amazing. It brought language to things that had been in my mind and in my heart that I didn't have before. And I started making sense about what I was also dealing with at Ducere. I was unhappy. However, I had many reasons to stay. I had a powerful network. I was making some good money to support myself and my family. And I kept saying to myself that things would get better. That's what I always said, things would get better. Thinking that things would get better is a problematic way of thinking about your life. It was a problematic way of thinking about my life. Whenever I said things would get better, it had me not be responsible for what could be possible for me. What other opportunities? Whenever I said things would get better, what I'm truly communicating is that I'm stuck. I'm not free. When I say things will get better, I'm not in the space of infinite possibility. I'm in the space of deprivation. When people say things will get better, they don't look out for whether they've got other opportunities for themselves, maybe at work. When people say things will get better in a relationship, they get stuck being in an unhappy relationship, an unhappy marriage. When people say things will get better, there is no opportunity to look at how or what new actions to take to improve the situation. I was saying to myself things would get better. I wasn't looking at how this would change. I was stuck. I was not free. When I realized that my life could be very simple, that life is very simple, that without integrity, nothing works, I drew the line in the sand for myself. I no longer was going to live in the story that things would get better. I was going to take charge of my life. This was very scary for me because I was about to enter into a whole new domain. So I looked at what I could create for myself. I decided that I was going to continue to spend and use my energy growing the Gomo Foundation, as well as step out authentically being a business person. I had come to the realization that I was not a business person. I had been the man behind the man. Now it was time to step out and create my legacy. I created a deadline for myself to have a conversation. If I did not, I wasn't going to have this conversation. So I created a deadline to have this conversation with the co-founder of Ducere. I remember I walked into his office. I asked if he had a moment. He said, yes, I've got about 15 minutes. I said, I'd like to create an opportunity with you. He said, what is this opportunity? I said, I want to continue to grow the foundation that I've started, which means that I can no longer work full-time inside of the company. However, I don't want to just leave the company and leave this gap inside of the negotiations of deals. He looked at me and he said, what do you propose? I said, I will start my own company and will consult to your company and continue negotiating deals. He said, that could work. I then created what our financial arrangement would be. I created that I'd be on a retainer on a monthly basis and also get a fixed amount of money for every deal I closed. I created a retainer for $3,000 a month, and for every deal I closed, I was going to get $5,000. Now, in the scheme of things, that was peanuts. I was negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. In my world, I just saw this as a transition period as I set myself up to create my company, the next phase of my life.